So today I thought I'd show you how to make these lovely hanging hearts with some gold leaf as decoration. In my last craft challenge I showed you how to make some air dry clay fridge magnets, and the process for this is very similar, and I did make these at the same time. So do use the timestamps or the chapters in the video description to jump around to the part of the video that you need to watch if you're going to make your own. So the equipment that you'll need is some air dry clay in white, a rolling pin, some cling film and some baking paper, a heart-shaped cutter, some matte varnish, some white enamel paint, some gold leaf flakes, some small hook eyes, a selection of paintbrushes, and you can use your old paintbrushes if you want, and some white spirit to clean them. So a 1 kilogram pack of clay made 32 of these hanging hearts. If you don't want to make that many, just cut what you need and then wrap the excess clay up in some cling film and pop it in a Ziploc bag, and that should keep it good for a few more weeks for your next project. So in order to roll the clay out evenly, I made some stays with some wedges of paper, and I made these about 7mm thick, and it's really just to make sure that the hearts are even when we make them. If you don't have this much paper lying around, you could use some cardboard, but don't use corrugated cardboard because that will depress as you roll, or you could use 2 thin books that are the same thickness. To roll out the clay, I just put a layer of cling film over my work surface and a layer of cling film on top of the clay, and then just used my rolling pin to flatten out the clay, making sure that my rolling pin stayed within the boundaries of the stays that I'd made, the paper stays. Using the cling film top and bottom really helps this process. It stops the clay from sticking to your surface and also stops it from sticking to your rolling pin. Now the footage I'm using here is from the fridge magnets that I made, so if you see some impressions in the clay, that's why. Once your clay is even, what you want to do is just use your heart-shaped cutter to just press through the cling film and cut as many hearts as you can from your rolled out clay. Using the cling film on the top gives a really nice rounded edge to the front of the clay. Once you've cut all your shapes out, pull back the cling film and then pull off the outer edges of clay, just leaving the clay hearts in place. And then you can lift up the lower sheet of cling film and gently remove each of the clay hearts. This helps to prevent any bending or misshaping of the hearts as you're removing them from the cling film. So once you've cut out your hearts, place them on a sheet of baking paper. So the baking paper will start to absorb some of the moisture from the clay hearts, but don't worry about that, that's totally normal. And once you've cut all your hearts, we need to put in the hook eyes. What we want to do is insert 1 hook eye into each of the clay hearts at the centre, and just push it in as far as you can, trying to make sure that you're not having it pointing out the back or the front. The clay shrinks as it dries, so it should hold the hook eye in place. I had one that didn't hold in place, and I just popped a little bit of high-tack glue at the top just to secure it. So drying out the hearts is a fairly long process. My hearts took about 4 days to dry completely, and to prevent them curling up at the edges, what I did was I flipped them every 3 hours. Yes, I did that for 4 days. Overnight, I wasn't going to get up every 3 hours to flip them, so I just put another layer of baking paper on top of the hearts and a large piece of cardboard on top of that. This is just to help retain the moisture overnight so they don't dry out too quickly. And as they were drying, I found the outer ones were drying quicker than the inner ones, so I just switched their position around on the board. So 4 days later, we're ready to start sanding the hearts. Now, take your time with this process. I did this process outside because it can get a little bit messy, so you want a good dry day to go outside and do this. I used a combination of P60 and P100 sandpaper. The coarser one I did first all around the edges just to get the bulk of any of the excess clay off, and the finer one I used just to make sure all of those little kind of wrinkles were just smoothed out. So the next process is just to cover the hearts with some matte varnish. This really just helps seal the hearts, and also it helps to get rid of any loose bits of dry clay that might still be sitting on the surface. And when I put it on, it looks a little bit streaky because it's soaking into the clay, but when it's dry, it's completely clear. So the varnish doesn't take too long to dry, but you will need to varnish both sides, so allow yourself an extra day for that process. Once the varnish is dry, we can move on to painting the enamel. Now again, you're going to have to do one side at a time, and this process will take about a day for each side. What I did was I took a piece of board and I put some masking tape over some cocktail sticks, just so that when I was leaving the hearts to dry, they wouldn't be directly on the cardboard surface, because the last thing I wanted was bits of paper or cardboard sticking to the enamel as it was drying. So just raising them off the surface just slightly was a perfect solution. I did run out of cocktail sticks, and I made an elaborate display with a selection of biros as well and gel pens. But yeah, whatever you can just to raise it off the surface just a little bit as it dries. So I first of all put enamel all the way around the edge of the hearts. And then started painting the top surface. Now the enamel is self-leveling, but you do want to put it on nice and thickly, so that's what's going to give you the high gloss as the end result. This is quite a messy process, so if you don't like getting paint on your hands or don't want to use white spirit on your hands, do wear some gloves. And you can clean down the brushes and your hands with white spirit afterwards. So the enamel does take quite a long time to dry, and my intention here was to put some flecks of gold leaf on top of the enamel so that when it dries it will set into the enamel. And I just randomly took some flakes of the gold leaf and sprinkled them over the top of the enamel without touching the enamel with my paintbrush. It helps if your paintbrush is slightly wet with a little bit of water. That will help pick up each of the individual pieces of gold leaf, but you don't want it so wet that you won't be able to just touch it down onto the enamel. This is quite a relaxing process, and if you do notice any blemishes in your hearts, you can always use the gold leaf to cover those up as well. So don't try and press the gold flakes down at this stage, just let them sit on top and we'll come back to them in about half an hour. So after about half an hour, you will notice that your enamel is tacky, and if you pushed your fingernail in, you'd make an impression, but it's tacky, but you can just gently touch it with your finger without getting any fingerprints or lifting up any paint. So at this stage, you can add any extra gold leaf if you want to, because it's still tacky enough to hold it in place. It's just for adding the extra finishing touches. If your enamel is really thick, the gold leaf will start to sink into it. So this is why I came back to it 30 minutes later when it was tacky enough that if any extra gold leaf that I was putting on wasn't going to sink right into the enamel. So after about an hour, I went back to these and I pressed the gold leaf with a dry brush onto the tacky enamel. So I was just smoothing out the edges where it was slightly raised from the heart, just to flatten out the gold leaf. I'm not pressing really hard with the paintbrush. It's just a gentle touch. You can use really old awful brushes for this process. It's just, you want the gold leaf to settle onto that tacky enamel. So the enamel should dry overnight, and the next day you can repeat the process on the other side. Once both sides are done, the last process with the gold leaf is a little bit messy, but what you want to do is get a firmer brush and just brush off any loose parts of the gold leaf that haven't quite adhered to the enamel. and then all you need to do is attach your ribbon and you're done. So thank you for watching. Do give me a thumbs up if you've made it this far. Your support is very much appreciated, and do let me know how you get on if you make these yourself. And yeah, do subscribe if you'd like to see more challenges, more arts, more crafts, and have a little bit of inspiration.